News almost at a place where Christine Rocher has ended. Phyllis Bottome has been very close to Adler during the last 10 years of his life. Just let me start by telling one word about the pronunciation of her name. Her name, as she said herself, should be pronounced Bottome. She writes somewhere, Bottome rhymes on home, so that's why I'm talking of Mrs. Bottome. I came to study her life when I started to translate her Adler biography into German. In studying her life, I found that it opened valuable perspectives on Alfred Adler himself. In order to introduce Phyllis Bottome, I have selected 5 aspects of her personality. She herself has written 3 volumes of autobiography, all titled with very Adlerian names: Search for a Soul, The Challenge, and The Goal. These are 3 volumes which document her life. In order to, but I cannot in 15 minutes, I cannot give you a complete picture of this, so I'm just putting the focus on 5 aspects of her personality. Bottome as a writer, a patient, a wanderer, an individual psychologist, and a political activist. My focus will be on the last one because it shows her firm standing in Adlerian thinking. But let me shortly go through aspects 1 to 4. First, the writer. She was an important English novelist, famous in England and in the United States, born in 1882. She had started writing very early in life and had completed more than 30 novels, many short stories and essays, until she died in 1963 at the age of 81. Number 2, the patient. At the age of 19, she was diagnosed with tuberculosis and was threatened by it during many years. Her health remained poor during all her life. Number 3, the wanderer. Wandering in the sense that she has been in many countries. As a child, she had lived with her family 6 years in America, which she considered as her second homeland. Due to tuberculosis at 19, she was sent to a sanatorium in the Alps, where she met and married Alfred Dennis. Then followed 35 years in Central Europe, mainly in Switzerland, Austria, and Germany, before she returned to England. She continued traveling in many countries. Number 4, the individual psychologist. It was her husband who first met Adler in Vienna to discuss educational problems. Phyllis met Adler a few months later in Kitzbühel, Austria, and first was not impressed. By becoming more and more acquainted with Adler, her thinking and her outlook on life were changed completely. A sort of metanoia occurred. She and her husband became intimate friends with Adler, who advised them to go to Munich and work with Leonard Seif, which they did for 3 years. Ernan became Adler's secretary, or aide de camp, as is written, in England. Shortly before he died, Adler even made Ernan Forbes Dennis his European representative. He followed later in life Adler's suggestion to become an IP therapist. His wife's reaction upon Adler was to fill her novels with the spirit of individual psychology and to adopt Adler as her mentor. Adler chose her as his biographer not long before his death. Last year, by the way, had appeared an excellent biography of Phyllis Bottome, written by Pen Hirsch, a lecturer of English literature from Cambridge University, England. Number 5, the political activist, which is my today's focus. Bottome as a fighter against fascism, anti-Semitism and racism. I have chosen 4 cities which are the background of her political life. Vienna, Munich, London and New York. The couple came to Vienna shortly after the end of World War I, and they experienced the social chaos of Austria's capital in the 1920s, the fallen aristocrats, and the position of Jews in that unstable society. In 1930, the couple moved to Munich. The Wall Street crash of October 1929 provided the crisis that Hitler needed to draw wide-ranging popular support. In the winter of 1932, Hitler's grim shadow was beginning to fall over Munich. At this time, Phyllis often saw Hitler lunching in his favorite restaurant, the Café Heck. By chance, it was also the cafe of choice for the group of IP students who met to discuss what they had learned from their observations in Seiff's child clinic. In 1935, Bottome went back to England, where she hadn't been for 35 years. She was very surprised about the political situation of her home country, as she did not understand and did not agree with the British appeasement policy which continued after Hitler's rise to power. She felt sick about the lack of concern in those to whom she spoke. Quote, "The fate of 6 million Jews was in the balance. I simply could not believe in the easy nonchalance of London. When I met conservatives, they stared at me in frank bewilderment. Oh, but we like Hitler, they said." Unquote. She slowly realized that the British public had been lulled into a false sense of security by most of the press and the BBC. Only exception, by the way, today's the same, the Manchester Guardian, who openly stated that anti-Semitism was fundamental to Hitler's policy. Shocked at her discovery that Britain was purposely closing her eyes, Phyllis's desperate determination was to write the novel that would wake up Britain and America to the perils of Hitler's ambitions. The name of this novel is The Mortal Storm, an impassioned polemic against fascism. A German family of Jews and non-Jews split by the unhuman politics of the Nazisms. In the novel, she was applying Adler's psychology to political behavior, and at the same time she was expressing her deep love for Alfred Adler into the portrait of Professor Toller. She dedicated the novel to the memory of Dr. Adler. Soon after the occupation of Austria by Hitler in March 1938, she wrote an article entitled "I Accuse," but nobody in Britain wanted to publish it. With the aid of American writer Upton Sinclair, she managed to get her letter "I Accuse" published in the American review New Republic. Like Sinclair, Phyllis believed that the purpose of art was to bring out the truth of history, a goal which they both had in common. "I Accuse" refers obviously to Zola's J'accuse, a public letter by which the French author defended the French officer Alfred Dreyfus, who had been falsely convicted of treason because he was a Jew. Here follow just the beginnings of 3 of Bottome's courageous sentences. Quote, "I accuse Lord Halifax of invincible ignorance. I accuse the Prime Minister of being publicly cited in a German newspaper as Germany's man. I accuse the Cliveden set of money-conditioned thinking, and that they are deliberately using their great power of the press, which they help to control, to hand England over to the dictators in order to save their skins and their pockets." Unquote. The Cliveden set was an aristocratic, extremely rich group of persons considered to be in favor of Hitler. They had relations to Lord Rothermere, who owned, with the Daily Mail, the Daily Mirror, and others, a great part of the British press, which at that period, according to several historians, was considered to be pro-Hitler. Back in London, Bottome wrote a pamphlet, "What Are Dictators?", which was distributed in Hyde Park. Another activity which she started against the appeasement movement was to support Winston Churchill's return into the government. Due to the enormous success of The Mortal Storm in America, 65,000 copies were sold. The Ministry of Information sent her to the United States to undertake covert propaganda. The conversion of American opinion from isolationism to support of entry into World War II was a delicate job and had to be handled very carefully. 96% of the American population was against America's entering the war. Bottome's lectures were advertised as being either about literature or about Adlerian psychology. But her activities in America were not limited to speeches. She negotiated with Hollywood's film industry to make a film of her novel The Mortal Storm. It became a very successful propaganda film, which not only showed the brutality of the Nazi regime, but was at the same time a thorough study of fascism. In September 1940, when London was bombed heavily, Bottome wrote a book about Britain in wartime to arouse sympathy in America for Britain's endangered situation. The book was finally titled Formidable to Tyrants and was dedicated to all those who love human beings better than they love power. After World War II, Bottome's political activity continued. The couple had realized that fascism in Central Europe was conquered, but not racism, this remainder of colonialism all over the world. In the remaining 18 years of her life, until she died at the age of 81, she used her skills as a writer and her convictions as individual psychologist to combat racist oppression. She had become a public institution in Britain. The morning she died, the radio speaker of BBC London called her the champion of the underprivileged and the misunderstood. Phyllis Bottome is known to individual psychologists the world over as the writer of the first biography of Alfred Adler, a biography from which today's readers can still profit immensely. Not only did she draw a vivid picture of Adler's personality, but from her writing career and her political activities, we may get a glimpse of how Adler, intimately close to Bottome and her husband for the last 10 years of his life, might have viewed the political and economic situation in Europe and the world during the disastrous years of fascism and World War II. And we may assume which answer Adler might have formulated had he lived longer. Bottome's intense relationship to Adler, as well as her identification with him and his teachings, were fundamental sources of inspiration, enriching her writings and contributing considerably to the development of her political convictions and actions. She took Adler's call for social responsibility very seriously, living according to one of his more cherished tenets: persons should not be judged by what they say, but by what they do. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you for this insightful talk. And now we have 10 minutes left and to answer every question you have.
I defer.
Yeah, okay. Lieber John.